She's yours. 2 words. That's all it took to shatter the empire of Korea's most powerful tech CEO in front of a lobby full of witnesses. When Naomi Brooks walked through the glass doors of Orion Dynamics with a 10-year-old girl whose face was an undeniable reflection of Han Jae-min himself, the air didn't just shift, it cracked. No appointment, no warning, just a decade of silence ending in one explosive moment. The girl's eyes held questions that money couldn't bury. The mother's steady gaze carried proof that privilege couldn't erase. And the man at the center of it all? He was about to learn that some debts can't be paid in stock options. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far truth can travel when it refuses to stay hidden. Now let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment denial became impossible. The morning had started like every other at Orion Dynamics, pristine, controlled, untouchable. Han Jae-min stood on the 42nd floor of the Seoul headquarters, a kingdom of glass and steel that bore his family's name and his personal ambition. The skyline stretched before him like a conquered landscape, each building a testament to what vision and ruthlessness could achieve. At 37, he had built himself into something more than a CEO. He was a brand, a dynasty in progress, the face of technological innovation across 3 continents. His assistant, Min Seo, appeared at the threshold of his office with the day's briefing tablet. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood that Jae-min's time was measured in millions per hour. "Morning meeting with the development team at 9, she began, her voice crisp. "Lunch with the Minister of Digital Infrastructure at noon. The Engagement Party Planning Committee needs your approval on the venue selections. Your mother has narrowed it to 3 options. Jae-min nodded without turning from the window. His engagement to Seo Ji-woo, daughter of the country's largest telecommunications conglomerate, was more than a marriage. It was a merger of empires. The wedding, scheduled for spring, would be covered by every major publication in Asia. Everything was proceeding exactly as designed. "And the Singapore expansion?" he asked. "Documents are ready for your signature. Legal has cleared everything." "Good. Schedule the press conference for next week." He finally turned, his expression unreadable but confident. "I want full media presence. This isn't just business expansion, it's a statement." Min Seo made notes swiftly. "Understood. Also, your mother called. She wants to discuss the guest list for—" The desk phone buzzed, an internal line from the lobby security. Jae-min frowned. Direct calls from security were reserved for emergencies. "Yes?" The voice on the other end was young, uncertain, completely out of protocol. "Mr. Han, there's a situation in the main lobby. A woman with a child. She's asking for you specifically. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's refusing to leave and—" "Then have her removed." Jae-min's tone was flat, dismissive. "That's what security is for." "Sir, she says—" The guard hesitated. "She says the child is your daughter." The words hung in the air like smoke before an explosion. Jae-min's hand tightened on the phone. "Repeat that." "She claims the girl is your daughter, sir. The child is— People are starting to notice. She looks—" "I'll handle it." Jae-min ended the call with more force than necessary. Min Seo stood frozen, her tablet still raised, her eyes carefully neutral. Years of working for the Han family had taught her when to speak and when to become invisible. This was a moment for invisibility. "Cancel the morning meeting," Jae-min said quietly. "I'll be in the lobby." He moved toward the elevator with the controlled stride of a man walking into battle, his mind already racing through possibilities. A scam, corporate sabotage, a calculated attack timed to coincide with his engagement announcement. The Han family had enemies. Success always bred them. And this had the signature of someone trying to create leverage through scandal. But even as he formed these rational explanations, something cold was settling in his chest. A memory he'd buried so deep it had almost ceased to exist. London. 10 years ago. A different life. He pushed it away. The elevator descended through the building's 42 floors in smooth silence. Through the glass walls, he could see employees at their desks, the vast machinery of his empire functioning exactly as it should, everything in its place, everything under control. The doors opened to the main lobby, and control shattered. She stood near the reception desk, exactly as out of place as security had implied. A black woman in her mid-30s, wearing a coat that had seen too many winters, holding the hand of a little girl whose face... Jamin stopped breathing. The child was small for her age, maybe 10 years old, with skin the color of amber honey and hair that fell in dark waves around her shoulders. But it was her face that made the lobby feel like it was tilting. The shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, the way she held her chin up despite obvious nervousness. She looked exactly like his childhood photos. The lobby had gone silent. Employees who'd been crossing through had stopped, phones out, some pretending to check messages while their cameras pointed toward the unfolding scene. The reception staff stood paralyzed behind their desk. Even the glass doors seemed to have stopped admitting people, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Naomi Brooks watched him approach with eyes that held no anger, no desperation, just a terrible, patient certainty that made his carefully constructed defenses feel like paper. "Hello, Jae-min," she said quietly. Her voice carried a British accent, refined but worn at the edges. "It's been a long time." He found his voice, though it came out harder than he intended. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but... Father." The word came from the child. Her voice was small but clear, cutting through his prepared responses like a blade through silk. She spoke in English, the pronunciation careful, as if she'd practiced this moment. Jae-min felt the lobby's attention press against him like physical weight. Dozens of eyes. Dozens of phones. In the age of social media, scandal traveled at the speed of light, and he was standing at ground zero of something that could destroy everything he'd built. "Mincio," he said without taking his eyes off Naomi and the girl, knowing his assistant had followed him down. "Clear the lobby, now, and get security to confiscate any phones that recorded anything." "Sir, that would require..." "Do it." Mincio moved with swift efficiency, her voice rising above the lobby's hush with authoritative instructions about a mandatory security protocol. Employees began to shuffle toward exits, some reluctantly, others with the barely concealed excitement of people who'd just witnessed something explosive. But the phones had already done their work. Jae-min knew it with cold certainty. Somewhere in this building, footage was already uploading to private chats, being forwarded to journalists, spreading like wildfire through the networks that fed on the lives of people like him. When the lobby had mostly cleared, he turned his full attention to Naomi. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Whatever game you're playing, this isn't a game." Naomi's calm was more disturbing than any anger could have been. "This is your daughter. Her name is Ilara. She's 10 years old, and she deserves to know her father." The girl, Ilara, was staring at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Not because it was hostile, but because it was searching, looking for something in his face, looking for recognition, looking for him. "Conference room, now." Jae-min gestured toward the hallway leading away from the lobby's glass exposure. "If you want to talk, we do it privately." "That's all I wanted," Naomi said. "Privacy was never the problem. Denial was." She took Ilara's hand and followed him down the corridor. The girl walked with careful steps, her eyes taking in everything. The marble floors, the modern art on the walls, the evidence of wealth so vast it had become architecture. The conference room was smaller than the boardroom, but still designed to intimidate. A long table, leather chairs, walls of windows overlooking the city. Jae-min closed the door and immediately turned on Naomi with barely controlled fury. "You have exactly 5 minutes to explain yourself before I have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. I have DNA results." Naomi reached into her bag with steady hands and placed a folder on the conference table. "I have photographs from London. I have the address of the flat we shared near King's Cross. I have your letters, your emails, and every promise you made before you disappeared." Jae-min didn't touch the folder. "Anyone can fabricate documents. Anyone can..." "I have her." Naomi's voice rose for the first time, sharp with emotion. "I have a daughter who learned Korean by herself because she wanted to speak to her father. A child who knows your birthday, your company's anniversary, every public speech you've ever given, because she's been watching you from across the world, hoping you'd remember we exist." Ilara was still standing near the door, her small frame tense, her eyes moving between them like she was watching a play she didn't fully understand but knew would determine her life. Jae-min forced himself to breathe, to think. London. The year he'd spent abroad ostensibly for graduate studies but really escaping family pressure, finding himself, being someone other than the Han heir. He'd met Naomi at a university lecture series. She was completing her PhD in digital ethics, sharp and brilliant, and unlike anyone in his carefully curated soul life. For 6 months, it had been real, dangerously, recklessly real. Then his father had called him home. An emergency. Family duty. The company needed him. And Jae-min had gone, promising to return, promising to figure it out, promising to... He'd never gone back. "You disappeared," Naomi said quietly, reading his face. "No explanation. No response to my messages. I was 2 months pregnant when you vanished. I tried to find you, tried to contact your family, but every door closed, so I did what I had to do. I raised our daughter alone." "Why now?" His voice was hoarse. "Why wait 10 years?" "Because I thought you deserved the chance to be ignorant." Naomi's eyes held his without flinching. "I thought maybe you had reasons. Maybe you'd been forced to choose. Maybe you'd regretted it but didn't know how to fix it. So I gave you time. I gave you space. But last month, Alara saw your engagement announcement on the news. She watched you smile for the cameras with another woman, planning a future, building a family. And she asked me why we weren't enough." The words hit like physical blows. "I couldn't answer that question," Naomi continued, "because I don't know why we weren't enough, so I'm here to find out. And more importantly, so is she." Jae-min finally looked at Alara. Really looked at her. The girl met his gaze with a composure that seemed impossible for someone her age. No tears, no pleading, just that searching, terrible patience. "Do you speak Korean?" he asked, switching languages without thinking. "Yes." Her response came in flawless Korean, the accent native perfect. "I taught myself. I wanted to understand you." Something in his chest cracked. The grammar, the pronunciation. This wasn't casual learning. This was dedication. This was a child building a bridge across an ocean to reach a father who'd never acknowledged her existence. "The DNA test," Naomi said, pushing the folder forward. "If you don't believe me, take your own. I'll wait. But you'll do it knowing what you're looking for, the truth you've been running from." Jae-min's hands moved to the folder before his mind could stop them. Inside were documents, lab letterhead, genetic markers, percentages, and conclusions. And photographs. Him and Naomi outside a London cafe. Him and Naomi at a park, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing. Him looking younger, freer, like someone who hadn't yet learned to calculate every smile. He barely recognized himself. "My parents," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "They paid you. I know they did. After I left London, they would have found out, They offered me money." Naomi's confirmation was matter of fact. "Quite a lot of it, actually. Your mother's assistant flew to London when I was 7 months pregnant. She said your family would never accept a mixed-race child. She said I'd be destroying your future. She said the money would ensure Alara had everything she needed without the burden of your family's disapproval." "And you took it?" "I took enough to cover medical bills and buy us time to figure out our lives. Nothing more." Naomi's voice was steady. "I didn't want to be paid off. I wanted you. But you'd made your choice, and your family made sure I understood it was final." The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of the building's ventilation. Outside the windows, Seoul continued its day, indifferent to the implosion happening in this small room. Alara moved for the first time, stepping away from the door and approaching the table. She didn't reach for Jae-min, didn't demand anything. Instead, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a small, worn photograph. "Mum gave me this," she said in Korean, placing it on the table. "She said you gave it to her. She said you told her it was your favorite picture of yourself because it was taken when you were happy." Jae-min looked down. The photo was of him at maybe 8 years old, standing on a beach, grinning with unguarded joy at whoever held the camera. He'd forgotten this picture existed, forgotten that version of himself existed. "I look at it sometimes," Alara continued, her voice soft but relentless. and try to imagine what you were thinking. What made you smile like that? Whether you'd smile like that at me if you knew me." The pain in her words was quiet but absolute. This child had grown up with questions that had no answers, waiting for a father who'd become a ghost, building her entire understanding of half her identity from photographs and internet searches. "I'm engaged," Jae-min said, the words feeling absurd even as he spoke them. "I'm getting married in 6 months. This complicates everything," Naomi finished. "I know, that's why we're here. Not to ruin your life, Jae-min, but to stop ruining hers." The door suddenly opened without warning. Jae-min's mother, Han Soo-min, stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 security officers and his father, Han Tae-sung, whose expression could have frozen steel. "Step away from my son," Soo-min commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades controlling rooms. She moved into the space like a general taking a battlefield, her eyes raking over Naomi with unveiled contempt before landing on Alara with something far more complicated: recognition and horror. "How dare you bring this situation into our building?" Soo-min continued in English, each word precisely cut. "After everything we paid you to stay away." Alara flinched. The subtle movement was almost invisible, but Jae-min saw it, saw his mother's words land like stones on a child who'd done nothing except exist. "You paid me to disappear," Naomi said, standing to face Soo-min directly. "You didn't pay me to cease existing. And you certainly didn't pay me to raise your granddaughter in silence while you erased her from your son's history." "She is not my granddaughter," Soo-min's voice was ice. "A mistake does not become family simply by appearing uninvited." The words hung in the air, ugly and absolute. Alara's face didn't change. She'd clearly heard the sentiment before, internalized it, built walls against it. But something in her eyes dimmed, a light of hope extinguishing in real time. Jae-min found himself moving before conscious thought caught up, stepping between his mother and the little girl who carried his face. "Stop." Soo-min's expression flickered with surprise. "Jae-min, don't be foolish. This is clearly a scam designed to—" "Look at her." His voice was quiet but edged with steel. "Mother, look at her face and tell me she's not mine." The silence that followed was suffocating. Soo-min's eyes moved to Alara, really seeing her for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable, inescapable. The girl was a perfect genetic bridge between Jae-min and Naomi, but the Han family features were dominant. The eyes, the bone structure, the way she held herself despite obvious discomfort. "DNA can be tested," Tae-sung spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly with age and power. "Before we acknowledge anything, we verify." "Of course." Naomi pulled out her phone with steady hands. "I have the clinic information, the chain of custody documentation, and the laboratory certification. You can run your own test with your own doctors. I welcome it, because unlike you, I've never been afraid of the truth." Jae-min watched his parents absorb this, saw the calculations running behind their eyes. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a threat to everything they'd built. The Han family legacy, the company's reputation, the engagement that would secure their empire's next generation. "We'll need time," Soo-min said finally, her voice regaining some control. "Time to verify, to assess, to determine the best course of—" "No!" Alara's voice cut through her grandmother's planning with unexpected force. She spoke in Korean, clear and sharp. "I don't need time. I needed a father. I needed family. But if you look at me and see a mistake, if you see something shameful that needs to be assessed and managed," her voice cracked, but she pushed through it, "then I already have my answer." She turned toward the door, pulling away from the table, from the family that was rejecting her even as they acknowledged her existence. Naomi moved to follow, her expression hardening into protective steel. "Wait!" Jae-min's voice stopped them both. "Just wait." He moved toward Alara, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more staggering, like looking at a mirror that showed him a future he'd never imagined. Her eyes held intelligence far beyond her years, sharpened by disappointment and survival. "Do you know what I do?" he asked softly in Korean. "What this company makes?" Alara nodded. "Advanced AI systems, machine learning platforms, and predictive analytics software.
You specialize in ethical algorithm development and transparent AI decision-making frameworks. Your last keynote speech at the Tokyo Tech Summit focused on removing bias from automated systems. Jamin blinked. This wasn't casual knowledge. This was comprehensive understanding delivered with precision that would impress his engineering team. "You've been studying me," he said. "I've been trying to know you," Alara corrected, "since I couldn't meet you." The distinction landed like an arrow. Behind him, he felt his parents' attention sharpening, felt them recognizing what he was seeing. This child wasn't just intelligent. She was extraordinary. A mind that absorbed, processed, retained. The kind of cognitive architecture that couldn't be taught, only discovered. "Your mother says you taught yourself Korean," he continued. "How long did that take?" 2 years of dedicated study, then another year of immersion through media and conversation practice online. Alara's voice remained steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I'm also learning Japanese and Mandarin. I want to understand the markets where your company operates." "Why?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. For the first time, her composure wavered. "Because I thought, if I understood your world, maybe I could be part of it. Maybe I could be someone you'd want to know." The confession was devastating in its simplicity. A child engineering herself into someone worthy of her father's attention, building bridges out of languages and knowledge, trying to make herself impossible to ignore. Jamin stood, his mind fracturing between the life he'd constructed and the reality standing before him. His engagement, his company, his parents' expectations, his own carefully designed future. And against all of that, a little girl who'd learned Korean to speak to him, who'd studied his life like a text she needed to understand, who'd been brave enough to walk into his world knowing she might be rejected. "We'll do the DNA test," he said, directing the words to everyone in the room. "Immediately. No delays, no evasions. We'll use an independent laboratory, full verification. And until we have those results..." He looked at his mother, his father, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. "Until we have those results, you will treat this child with respect, not as a mistake, not as a problem, but as a human being who deserves basic dignity." Sumin's expression tightened. "Jamin, think about what you're..." "I am thinking," he interrupted. "For the first time in years, I'm actually thinking. Now get the lab on the phone. We're settling this today." The room erupted into motion. His mother making calls, his father speaking in low, urgent tones to the security team about information containment. Minseo appeared with tablets and schedules, already adapting to the crisis with impressive efficiency. Through it all, Alara stood quietly beside her mother, watching the machinery of the Han family respond to her existence. She didn't smile, didn't show triumph or satisfaction. She just waited, patient and terrible, and utterly certain of what the truth would reveal. Naomi placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, protective but not possessive. Her eyes found Jamin's across the chaos, and in them he saw not accusation but something more complex. Disappointment, perhaps. Sadness for the years lost, the opportunities wasted, the father who'd needed his daughter to travel across the world before he'd acknowledged she existed. "There's a medical facility 3 blocks from here," Minseo reported, her tablet glowing with information. "They can perform immediate paternity testing with results available within 4 hours using rapid PCR protocols. I've already contacted their director. They're clearing a private suite now." "Good," Jamin nodded. "Arrange transport. Discreet." "Already done. A car is waiting in the underground garage." As they moved toward the door preparing to leave for the testing facility, Jamin felt the weight of eyes on him. His parents, watching their carefully constructed legacy crack. His assistant, witnessing the private life of a man who'd always maintained perfect professional distance. Security personnel who'd just seen their CEO confronted by a past he couldn't deny. And Alara. Always Alara, with those eyes that held his face and her mother's strength and a decade of questions that were finally, terrifyingly, about to get answers. The elevator ride down was silent. The underground garage was cool and private, the waiting car anonymous. As they settled into the leather seats, Naomi and Alara on one side, Jamin facing them, the vehicle pulled away from Orion Dynamics and into the Seoul afternoon. She knows calculus, Naomi said quietly, breaking the silence. She's reading at a university level. She builds computers from spare parts for fun. Her teachers say she's the most gifted student they've encountered in 20 years. Jaemin looked at Alara, who was staring out the window at the passing city. What do you want to be when you grow up? The question seemed to surprise her. She turned from the window, considering him with that unsettling intensity. I wanted to work at Orion Dynamics, she said simply. I wanted to help build the ethical AI systems you talk about in your speeches. I thought maybe if I was smart enough, good enough, eventually you'd notice me for what I could do instead of who I am. The pain in those words, the resignation, the strategic surrender of a child who'd already learned that her existence wasn't enough, that she'd have to earn even basic recognition, cut deeper than any accusation could have. You shouldn't have to earn your father's attention, Naomi said softly, her hand finding Alara's. That's not how family works. But it is how the Han family works, Alara replied, her voice holding a wisdom that should have been impossible at 10 years old. I researched them too. Performance, achievement, value. Everything has to be proven, earned, justified. Even love. She looked at Jaemin, and her eyes held no anger, just tired, sad understanding. I know you didn't want me. I know I'm a complication you never planned for, but I'm here now, and I'm real. And the DNA test is going to prove what Mum and I already know. So the question isn't whether I'm yours. The question is whether you want to be mine. The car continued through Seoul's streets toward the medical facility, carrying them all toward a truth that would shatter illusions and destroy carefully maintained lies. Jaemin sat in silence, watching his daughter, and she was his daughter. He knew it with bone-deep certainty now. Watching her observe the city like she was memorizing it, studying it, preparing for whatever came next with the careful intelligence of someone who'd learned young that life required strategy. He thought of the engagement party being planned, the wedding venue selections, the merger of empires that his marriage was supposed to represent, the future that had seemed so clear, so inevitable, just hours ago. And against all of that, a little girl who'd taught herself Korean to speak to him, who'd studied his life like scripture, who'd been brave enough to walk into his world knowing she might be destroyed by it. The medical facility appeared ahead, modern and discreet, exactly the kind of place where powerful people got answers they needed to keep private. As the car pulled into the underground entrance, Jaemin realized with cold clarity that everything was about to change. No matter what he wanted, no matter what he'd planned, no matter how carefully he'd constructed his life. The truth was about to become undeniable. And denial, he was learning, had always been the most expensive luxury of all. The medical facility's private suite was designed for discretion. Soft lighting, muted colors, soundproofed walls that absorbed secrets. A technician in pristine white scrubs moved with practiced efficiency, preparing sterile swabs and collection tubes while explaining the process in a voice trained to be simultaneously professional and forgettable. Jaemin sat in one chair, Alara in another across the small room, both waiting for the moment that would confirm what everyone already knew. Naomi stood by the window, her arms crossed, watching the city below with an expression that suggested she'd waited long enough and could wait longer still. The tension in the room was palpable but strange. Not the tension of uncertainty, but of inevitability finally catching up to denial. Open wide, the technician said to Alara in Korean, her voice gentle. The girl complied without hesitation, allowing the swab to brush against the inside of her cheek with clinical precision. The sample was sealed, labeled, logged with chain of custody documentation that would make the results legally unassailable. Then it was Jaemin's turn. The swab felt invasive despite its softness, the process humiliating in its simplicity. A decade of running, of burying, of constructing alternate realities, all of it reduced to cells scraped from the inside of his mouth and preserved in a plastic tube. 4 hours, the technician confirmed, glancing at the lab processing schedule. We'll have preliminary results by 6:30 this evening. Complete report with full genetic markers by tomorrow morning. 4 hours. Jaemin checked his watch. It was barely past noon. 4 hours until his carefully constructed life either continued with new complications or collapsed entirely. Though truthfully, he knew which outcome was coming. He'd known it the moment he saw Ilara's face in the lobby. The test wasn't about discovery. It was about documentation, making the undeniable official. "There's a cafe on the second floor," the technician offered, reading the room's discomfort. "Private seating. Most of our clients wait there." They moved in silence to the elevator, an awkward unit of 3 people bound by biology but strangers in every other sense. The cafe was exactly as promised, quiet, upscale, with discreet booths that offered privacy. They settled into one near the back, Ilara sliding in beside her mother, Jae-min taking the opposite bench like they were negotiating a business deal rather than navigating the wreckage of a family. A server appeared, took orders, coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Ilara, and vanished with the intuition of someone who recognized tension and knew to minimize contact. "So we wait," Naomi said, her voice cutting through the silence. It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement of the strange limbo they'd entered. "We wait," Jae-min confirmed. He watched Ilara, who was studying the cafe's interior with that same careful attention she seemed to bring to everything. "What do you do in London? For school, I mean." "I'm at Highgate Academy on scholarship," Ilara replied, her English crisp and formal. "It's a private school. Mum works 3 jobs to cover what the scholarship doesn't." The casual revelation hit harder than any accusation. 3 jobs. While he'd been building an empire, accumulating wealth beyond measure, the mother of his child had been working 3 jobs to give their daughter opportunities he could have provided with a fraction of his fortune. 3 jobs, he repeated, looking at Naomi. "Digital consulting, freelance editing, and weekend tutoring," Naomi said matter-of-factly. "It keeps us comfortable enough. Ilara has what she needs, but not what she deserves." The words came out before Jae-min could stop them, surprising even himself. Naomi's expression softened slightly, a crack in her armor of calm. "No," she admitted, "not what she deserves. But more than what your family's money could have bought, she has dignity. She has the knowledge that she's wanted, loved, valued for who she is, not as a problem to be managed or a scandal to be buried." The server returned with their drinks, providing a momentary distraction. Ilara wrapped her hands around the mug of hot chocolate, steam rising between them like a physical manifestation of the heat building in the conversation. "I didn't know," Jae-min said quietly. "About you being pregnant. My parents never told me." "Would it have mattered?" Naomi's question wasn't hostile, just genuinely curious. "If you'd known, would you have stayed? Would you have chosen us over the empire waiting for you in Seoul?" The honesty of the question deserved an honest answer. Jae-min thought back to that version of himself, 27 years old, caught between 2 worlds, suffocating under family expectations but not yet strong enough to break free. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think I would have. But I was a coward then. Maybe I still am." "At least you're an honest coward now," Naomi said, and there was no malice in it, just observation. Ilara had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke, her voice small but clear. "Mum says everyone makes choices they regret. She says the measure of a person isn't whether they made mistakes, but whether they try to fix them." "Your mother is wise," Jae-min said, meeting Naomi's eyes. "She had to be," Ilara continued, "because she had to be wise enough for both of you. The innocent brutality of children, cutting straight to truth that adults spent years dancing around." Naomi placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder, a gesture both comforting and cautioning, but the girl wasn't finished. "I used to imagine what you'd be like," Ilara said, looking directly at Jae-min now. "When I was little, I'd make up stories about you. In some of them, you were a spy on a secret mission and couldn't contact us because it was too dangerous. In others, you were sick and had amnesia and didn't remember you had a family. I made up every reason except the real one." "What's the real one?" Jae-min asked, though he knew the answer would hurt. "That we weren't important enough to fight for." Ilara's eyes held his without flinching. "That your other life, your real life, was more valuable than the mistake you made in London." The words landed like physical blows, each one precise and devastating. Jae-min wanted to argue, to explain the complexity of family obligation and cultural expectation and the weight of legacy. But sitting across from this child who'd spent a decade trying to understand why she wasn't enough, all those explanations felt like exactly what they were. Excuses. "You're right," he said simply. I made a choice, and it was the wrong one. I chose comfort over courage. I chose easy over right, and you paid the price for my cowardice." Alara blinked, clearly not expecting such direct acknowledgement. Something in her expression shifted. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that adults were imperfect creatures stumbling through consequences they never fully anticipated. Jamin's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He pulled it out to find a barrage of notifications. Missed calls from his mother, from his father, from Ji-woo, his fiancée, from the company's PR director. Messages demanding updates, requiring immediate response, asking questions he had no answers for yet. One message stood out, marked urgent, from Ji-woo. "My father just called. He heard rumors. We need to talk, now." The walls were closing in faster than he'd anticipated. In Seoul's elite circles, information traveled through networks of family connections and corporate alliances with terrifying speed. Someone in that lobby had talked, or someone on the medical staff had leaked details, or perhaps it was simply impossible to keep secrets in a world where everyone had cameras and connections. "I need to make a call," he said, standing from the booth. "Excuse me." He walked to the far corner of the cafe, near the windows overlooking the city, and dialed Ji-woo. She answered on the first ring. "Is it true?" No greeting, no preamble. Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I don't know what you've heard," Jamin began carefully. "That a woman walked into Orion Dynamics this morning with a child claiming to be your daughter. That your parents rushed to the building in a panic. That you canceled all your meetings and disappeared." Ji-woo's breath was quick, stressed. "My father's business partners are already calling to ask if the wedding is still happening. So I'll ask you again. Is it true?" Jamin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. Ji-woo deserved honesty, at minimum. "There's a child. A DNA test is being processed right now. Results in a few hours." The silence on the other end stretched so long he thought she might have hung up. Finally, "Do you think she's yours?" "Yes." Another silence, this one somehow louder than the first. When Ji-woo spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, sadder, resigned. "I knew something was wrong. When you proposed, you were perfect, too perfect, like you were performing a role rather than offering yourself. I told myself I was imagining it, that pre-wedding nerves affected everyone. But you've been hiding something all along, haven't you?" "Ji-woo, don't apologize. Just tell me the truth. Did you love her, the mother?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. He thought of Naomi as she'd been in London, brilliant, challenging, alive in ways that made his carefully controlled existence feel like sleepwalking. "I thought I did. Maybe I actually did. But I wasn't brave enough to choose it." "And now?" Ji-woo asked. "Now that choice is choosing you?" "Now I have to face what I ran from." Jamin watched Naomi and Alara through the cafe's interior, mother and daughter sitting close, united against a world that had required them to be. "I understand if you want to end the engagement." "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" Ji-woo's voice held no accusation, just tired understanding. "If I'm the one who walks away, you're not the villain who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and then abandoned his fiancée. You're just the victim of circumstances." "That's not what I need time," Ji-woo interrupted. "Time to think, to process, to figure out what this means for us. Don't contact me until the DNA results come back."
"If she's yours, and we both know she is, then we'll talk about next steps. But Jamin, if you're going to be a father, actually be one. Don't make the same mistake twice." She ended the call before he could respond. Jamin stood holding the silent phone, watching his reflection in the window overlap with the city behind it, a ghost of himself superimposed on the empire he'd built. When he returned to the booth, Naomi was showing Alara something on her phone, their heads bent together in casual intimacy that spoke of years of being each other's primary support. They looked up as he approached, and something in his expression must have conveyed the conversation's outcome. "Your fiancée," Naomi said. It wasn't a question. "She knows." Jamin slid back into the booth. "The whole city probably knows by now." "Good," Naomi said firmly. "Secrets are corrosive. They rot everything they touch. Better to face truth publicly than live privately in lies.
Easy to say when you're not the one whose life is imploding, Jamin shot back, then immediately regretted the sharpness. But Naomi just laughed, a short, bitter sound. Easy to say? Jamin, I've spent 10 years living with the truth of your abandonment. I faced every question, every judgment, every assumption about why I was raising a mixed-race child alone. I've watched Alara navigate identity questions that shouldn't exist, explaining to classmates why her father isn't in her life, building armor against rejection that no child should need. So don't tell me about imploding lives. I've been living in the crater of yours for a decade. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Other patrons glanced over, sensing drama, but unable to hear the specifics. Alara sat very still between them, a small witness to adult failures and grown-up pain. I'm sorry, Jamin said, and meant it fully for perhaps the first time. I'm sorry for all of it. The leaving, the silence, the cowardice. I'm sorry that my choices made your life harder. And her life, he looked at Alara, made your life a question mark when it should have been a certainty. I don't want your apologies, Alara said quietly. I want to know what happens next. If the test says what we know it'll say, then what? Do we go back to London and keep living like we have been? Do you send money and call on birthdays? Do you pretend this never happened? Or, Naomi added, her voice gentle but firm, do you actually show up? Because that's the only question that matters, Jamin. Not whether you're her biological father. The DNA will confirm that. The question is whether you want to be her actual father, present, involved, real. Before Jamin could formulate an answer to a question he hadn't expected to face so directly, his phone rang again. His mother's number. He considered ignoring it, but Han Su-min wasn't the type to be ignored. He answered, stepping away from the booth once more. Where are you? Su-min's voice was ice-wrapped in urgency. At the medical facility, waiting for results. You need to come to the house, now. Your father and I have consulted with attorneys. There are steps that need to be taken, agreements that need to be structured. I'm not negotiating my daughter's existence like it's a corporate merger, Jamin interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness. A pause. So you've already decided she's yours. I've already accepted what I've known since I saw her face, he corrected. The test is formality. The question is what I do about it. What you do, Su-min said carefully, is protect the family name, protect the company, protect your future. This girl and her mother have managed perfectly fine without you for 10 years. Financial support can be arranged discreetly. Education trusts, living expenses, even property if they want it. But Jamin, you cannot acknowledge her publicly. Not now. Not with the Singapore expansion pending and the merger with Jiwoo's family in progress. The merger? Jamin couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. Mother, I have a daughter, an actual human child who exists because of choices I made. And you're concerned about business deals? I'm concerned about everything we've built. Su-min's control cracked slightly, emotion bleeding through. Your grandfather started this company with nothing. Your father grew it into an empire. You've positioned it to dominate the next decade of technological development. One scandal, one moment of weakness, and competitors will use it to destroy us. The business world doesn't care about your personal redemption. It cares about stability, reliability, trustworthiness. Then maybe the business world needs to evolve, Jamin said quietly. You're being naive, childish. You're thinking with guilt and emotion instead of strategy, and I'm thinking like a father, he interrupted, or trying to, maybe for the first time. The silence that followed felt like his mother recalculating, reassessing, searching for new leverage. If you insist on acknowledging her, Su-min finally said, at least do it carefully. Legal frameworks, controlled disclosure. Let PR manage the narrative. Don't just react. I'll consider it, Jamin said noncommittally. But mother, I'm not paying her off. I'm not burying this. Not anymore. He ended the call before she could respond and returned to the booth where Naomi and Alara waited. They looked up at him with identical expressions of cautious expectation. Your family wants to pay us to stay quiet, Naomi said. It wasn't a question. She'd clearly anticipated this. My mother wants to manage the situation, Jamin confirmed. But I'm not interested in management. I'm interested in, He paused, not sure how to finish that sentence honestly. What was he interested in? Redemption seemed too self-centered, relationship too presumptuous, correction too clinical. "You're interested in not feeling guilty," Alara supplied, her voice holding that terrible child wisdom again. "You want to do something so you can tell yourself you tried. But trying isn't the same as succeeding, and showing up once isn't the same as staying." The observation was devastating in its accuracy. Jamin had spent his entire life succeeding through strategy, through planning, through controlled execution of carefully designed outcomes. But fatherhood, real fatherhood, the kind this child deserved, couldn't be strategized. It required something messier, more vulnerable, more terrifying than anything his business acumen had prepared him for. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need, but I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach me." Alara studied him with those unsettling eyes that held too much experience for someone her age. "I don't want to teach you how to be my father. I want you to want to be my father. There's a difference." "I know." Jamin felt the weight of that difference settle onto his shoulders like physical pressure. "And I can't promise I'll do it right. I'll probably fail in 100 different ways, but I'm here now, and I'm choosing to stay here. If you'll let me." Naomi's eyes glistened slightly, though she blinked away whatever emotion was threatening to surface. "That's a start," she said softly. "Just a start, but more than we've had before." The hours crawled past with excruciating slowness. They ordered food none of them really wanted, pushed it around plates while making stilted conversation about safer topics, Alara's favorite subjects at school, Naomi's work projects, the differences between London and Seoul, surface-level exchanges that carefully avoided the chasm of history and hurt that separated them. Around 5 o'clock, Jae-min's phone lit up with a message from Min-seo. PR crisis unfolding. Photos from lobby circulating on social media. Multiple news outlets requesting comment. Need guidance on response strategy. He showed the message to Naomi. "The story's breaking publicly. We need to decide how to respond." "We don't need to decide anything," Naomi corrected. "You need to decide what kind of man you want to be. Do you want to be the CEO protecting his empire or the father protecting his daughter?" "Why can't I be both?" "Because right now those roles are in conflict," Naomi said. "Your company wants secrecy and damage control. Your daughter needs acknowledgement and presence. You can't serve both masters, Jamin, not honestly." Before he could respond, the technician from earlier appeared at their booth, tablet in hand, expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Han, the preliminary results are ready. Would you like to review them here or in a private consultation room?" Jamin's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the moment when possibility became fact, when genetic truth replaced comfortable denial. "Here is fine," he said, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. The technician nodded and placed the tablet on the table, screen facing Jae-min. The document was dense with technical language, genetic markers, probability percentages, and scientific certainty. But the conclusion was simple, printed in bold text at the bottom of the report. Probability of paternity, 99.997%. The alleged father cannot be excluded as the biological father of the child. 99.997%. As close to absolute certainty as science could provide. Jae-min stared at the numbers, watching them transform his reality with mathematical precision. The daughter he'd run from for 10 years was undeniably, irrevocably, genetically his. He looked up at Alara, who was watching him with an expression that tried to be neutral, but couldn't quite hide the hope and fear warring beneath the surface. "You're mine," he said, the words feeling both monumental and insufficient. "You're actually mine." "I've always been yours," Alara said quietly. "The question was whether you wanted to be mine." The technician discreetly withdrew, leaving them in their bubble of reconfigured reality. Naomi reached across the table and gently turned the tablet so she could see the results, even though she'd never doubted them. She nodded once, satisfied, then looked at Jae-min with an expression that held challenge and invitation in equal measure. "So now you know," she said. "Scientifically, legally, undeniably, you're her father. What are you going to do with that information?"
Jamin's phone was buzzing incessantly now. Calls from his parents, from Jiwoo, from the PR team, from board members who'd somehow already heard. The entire infrastructure of his carefully constructed life was demanding his attention, requiring him to manage, control, minimize the damage. He picked up the phone and powered it off entirely. The screen went dark, silencing all those urgent voices demanding he choose between them and the truth sitting across from him. "I'm going to be present," he said, looking at Alara. "I can't undo 10 years of absence. I can't give you back the childhood where you had a father who showed up to school plays and taught you to ride a bike and made you feel chosen, but I can start now, today, this moment." "Pretty words," Alara said, and there was steel in her young voice. "But I've learned that adults are good at pretty words. It's the follow-through that matters." "Then watch me follow through." Jamin stood from the booth, a decision crystallizing with unexpected clarity. "Come with me, both of you. There's something we need to do." Naomi frowned. "Jamin, what—" "Trust me," he said, then caught himself. "Or don't trust me. I haven't earned that. But come anyway. Let me show you instead of telling you." They followed him from the cafe, through the medical facility's corridors, back to where the car waited in the underground garage. The driver looked up alertly as they approached. "Orion Dynamics headquarters," Jamin instructed. "Main entrance." The significance wasn't lost on Naomi. "You came down through the private garage earlier. You're taking us through the front door now." "The front door," Jamin confirmed, "where everyone can see." The drive back was tense with anticipation. Alara sat pressed against the window, watching the city pass, while Naomi studied Jamin with an expression that suggested she was trying to determine whether this was courage or catastrophic impulse. When they pulled up to Orion Dynamics' main entrance, the building that had seemed like a fortress that morning now felt like a stage. Employees were leaving for the day, streaming through the glass doors into the evening. Some glanced at the arriving car with casual curiosity. Others, who'd been in the lobby that morning, stopped dead, recognizing the players in the drama that had already become building legend. Jamin stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Alara from the car. She took it hesitantly, her small hand disappearing into his larger one. The gesture was simple but profound, a father helping his daughter, visible to anyone who cared to look. Naomi emerged last, standing beside them, a united front facing the building and everyone in it. "Last chance to change your mind," she said quietly to Jamin. "Once we walk in there together, there's no taking it back." "I don't want to take it back," he said, and felt the truth of it settle into his bones. "I'm done taking things back. Done hiding, done choosing comfort over courage." They walked toward the entrance together. The glass doors slid open, and they stepped into the lobby where the day's catastrophe had begun. But this time, Jamin didn't rush them to private rooms or hidden corridors. He stood in the center of the vast space, Alara's hand still in his, and let everyone see. The lobby went quiet. Heads turned, phones rose, cameras focusing, capturing this moment of acknowledgement that would ripple through social media, through news networks, through the elite circles that fed on scandal and revelation. Min Seo appeared from the elevator, tablet clutched to her chest, her expression stricken. "Mr. Han, the PR team needs to brief you immediately. The story is—" "Let it break," Jamin said calmly. "No more damage control. No more managing the narrative, just the truth." "But sir, the board is convening an emergency meeting. Your parents are demanding—" "Tell them I'll address everyone tomorrow morning," Jamin interrupted. "Full company meeting, complete transparency. But right now I have somewhere else to be." He turned to Alara, crouching slightly to meet her eye level as he had before. "Are you hungry? Actually hungry for real food, not cafe sandwiches?" The question seemed to confuse her. Yes?" "Good." He stood, still holding her hand. "Then let's go get dinner, like a family." The word hung in the air. Family, radical in its simplicity. Naomi's eyes widened slightly, processing what he was offering. Not a transaction, not a management strategy, but actual presence. Actual relationship, actual choice. They left the building together, walking back into the Seoul evening, 3 people connected by biology and history and the terrifying possibility of something new, beginning in the wreckage of something old.
Behind them, the lobby erupted into hushed conversation and frantic messaging as witnesses processed what they'd just seen: Korea's most powerful young CEO, publicly acknowledging the daughter he'd denied, choosing her over empire, over image, over everything he'd built his identity around. And somewhere in that moment, in the space between the life he'd constructed and the truth he could no longer deny, Jae-min felt something shift. Not redemption. That would take years to earn if it was even possible. But perhaps the beginning of honesty. The first step of a very long journey toward becoming someone his daughter might actually want as a father. The restaurant Jae-min chose was small, tucked into a side street in Itaewon, where international cuisine mingled with local tradition and anonymity was still possible among the district's diverse crowd. It was nothing like the places he usually frequented. No private rooms, no Michelin stars, no servers who recognized him on sight and anticipated his preferences. Just honest food and wooden tables worn smooth by years of use. They settled into a corner booth, menus in unfamiliar hands. Ilara studied hers with the same focused intensity she brought to everything, her lips moving slightly as she sounded out Korean characters she'd learned from books and screens, but rarely encountered in physical form. "The bulgogi is good here," Jae-min offered, then felt foolish. What did he know about what a 10-year-old liked to eat? Or if you prefer something less spicy. "I like spicy food," Ilara said, not looking up from the menu. "Mum makes curry at home. Proper spicy, not the mild version restaurants usually serve children." "Of course she does," Jae-min murmured, glancing at Naomi, who was watching this awkward dance of attempted connection with an expression somewhere between amusement and sadness. They ordered, too much food probably, but the act of choosing dishes together felt important somehow, like a small ritual of normalcy in a day that had shattered every assumption. When the server left, silence descended again, heavy with everything that had been said and everything that still needed saying. "Your parents are going to be furious," Naomi finally said, breaking the quiet. "Walking into your building like that, making it public, you've essentially declared war on their plan to manage this discreetly." "I know." Jaemin's jaw tightened. "They'll convene the board, probably try to pressure me to step down temporarily while this blows over. My mother has already called our attorneys. By now they've likely drafted a dozen different strategies for damage control." "And you're prepared for that?" Naomi pressed. "For what it might cost you." "I'm prepared to stop calculating costs before making moral decisions," Jae-min said. "That kind of math is how I ended up here in the first place." Ilara was listening to this exchange with the careful attention of someone trying to understand adult complexities. "Will they try to hurt Mum?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but direct. "Your family. Will they try to make her go away again?" The question revealed the fear beneath her composed exterior, a child who'd learned that powerful people could make inconvenient truths disappear, that money could buy silence, that her existence was conditional on whether it benefited those with resources. "No one is making anyone go away," Jae-min said firmly. "Not this time. Not ever again." "You can't promise that," Ilara countered. "You don't control everything, even if you're rich and powerful. Your parents have money too. They have lawyers and influence, and they've already proven they're willing to use it." The logic was sound, undeniable. Jae-min found himself facing the limits of his power. In business, he could direct outcomes, negotiate terms, impose his will through position and resources. But family operated by different rules, rules where authority and control meant less than loyalty and blood, and right now those loyalties were bitterly divided. The food arrived in stages, banchan dishes covering the table with variety, main courses steaming and fragrant, rice in stone bowls that crackled with heat. They ate in sporadic silence, interrupted by small exchanges about flavors and textures, the meal becoming a strange meditation on ordinary moments that had been denied for a decade. Halfway through dinner, Jae-min's phone, which he'd powered back on reluctantly, began buzzing with such persistence that ignoring it became impossible. He glanced at the screen and saw his father's number, the third call in as many minutes. "I should take this," he said, already standing. "I'll be right back." He stepped outside into the evening air, the street alive with the sounds of Seoul's nightlife beginning. He answered on the fourth ring. "You've lost your mind." Han Tae-sung's voice was controlled fury, each word precisely cut. Do you have any idea what you've done? The photos are everywhere. Business news, social media, entertainment channels, our family's private business exposed to public consumption like some tawdry scandal. It's not a scandal, Father. It's the truth. Truth? Tae-sung's laugh was bitter. Truth is a luxury for people who don't have empires to protect. You think your competitors care about your personal redemption? They're already preparing to use this against us. The Singapore deal is in jeopardy. The G family is reconsidering the merger. Our stock price dropped 2% in after-hours trading. Jaemin leaned against the restaurant's exterior wall, feeling the weight of what his choice was costing. Not just him, but everyone connected to the Han Empire. Employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. Investors who'd trusted their capital to stable leadership. Partners who'd built strategies around projected growth. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "Deny my own daughter? Pay them off and pretend she doesn't exist?" "I would have you be strategic," Tae-sung said. "Acknowledge her privately, provide for her generously, but keep it separate from the business, from the public eye. This doesn't have to destroy everything we've built." "It already destroyed something more important than what we built," Jaemin countered. "It destroyed her childhood, her sense of being wanted, her ability to trust that she matters." "She's a child you didn't know existed until this morning," Tae-sung said impatiently. "Don't pretend this is about her welfare. This is about your guilt, your need to feel like a good person. But good people don't sacrifice hundreds of employees' job security for personal absolution." The argument landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Was he being selfishly righteous? Privileging his own emotional needs over practical consequences? The certainty he'd felt in the building's lobby was already eroding under the weight of real-world implications. "I'm not abandoning her," Jaemin said, but his voice carried less conviction now. "No one's asking you to abandon her," Tae-sung replied, sensing weakness. "We're asking you to be smart about this. Meet with our attorneys tomorrow. Draft a proper agreement. Set up trusts, education funds, whatever she needs. But do it legally, privately, properly. Not through public spectacle that damages everything you've worked for." "I'll think about it," Jaemin said, hating how easily he was retreating. "Think quickly," Tae-sung said. "The board meets tomorrow at 9. Be prepared to address their concerns. And Jaemin, your mother and I are not your enemies in this. We're trying to help you navigate an impossible situation without losing everything." The call ended, leaving Jaemin standing in the Seoul night with the weight of competing responsibilities pressing down from all sides. Through the restaurant window, he could see Naomi and Alara at their table, heads bent close in conversation, a unit of two that had survived a decade without him and would probably survive whatever came next. He returned to the table with his father's words echoing in his mind. Naomi looked up, reading his expression immediately. "They're applying pressure," she said. It wasn't a question. "My father thinks I'm being impulsive, emotional. He wants me to handle this through proper legal channels, private agreements, structured support." "In other words, money instead of presence," Naomi translated. "Payment instead of relationship. Exactly what they offered 10 years ago. He says the company is at risk, that my public acknowledgement today put hundreds of jobs in jeopardy, damaged business relationships, created instability." "And you believe him?" Jaemin met her eyes, saw the challenge there. "I believe there are consequences to every choice. I'm just trying to figure out which consequences I can live with." Alara had been quiet during this exchange, pushing rice around her bowl with mechanical movements. Now she spoke, her voice carefully flat. "You're already changing your mind. We've been real to you for less than a day, and already you're calculating whether we're worth the cost." "That's not—" Jaemin started, but she cut him off. "It's exactly what you're doing. I've watched enough negotiation shows to recognize it. You're in the compromise phase, figuring out how to give the minimum required to satisfy everyone. Some money for us, some privacy for your family, some way to split the difference so no one's too upset." The accuracy of her assessment was devastating. This child had spent her life studying him from a distance, learning to read patterns and predict behaviors, developing expertise in the man who'd abandoned her. She knew him better than he knew himself. "Maybe that's not entirely bad," Naomi said quietly. "Compromise isn't always cowardice, Alara. Sometimes it's wisdom.
Your father has responsibilities beyond just us, people who depend on him, obligations that existed before we walked into his life. So we're supposed to accept scraps? Alara's voice rose slightly, emotion finally cracking through her careful control.
We're supposed to be grateful for whatever attention he can spare between board meetings and protecting his reputation?
We're supposed to be realistic, Naomi said gently, about what's possible, about what we actually need versus what we might want. I don't want anything from him, Alara said, but tears were gathering at the corners of her eyes, betraying the lie. I just wanted him to choose us. Once. Just once. I wanted to be more important than everything else. The statement hung in the air, simple and impossible. Jamin looked at this child, his child, crying quietly over bibimbap in a restaurant where no one knew who they were or what they were negotiating, and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding. His father was right that there would be consequences. His mother was right that there were practical realities to consider.
But Alara was also right that choice had meaning, that priority revealed character, that a lifetime of calculation had led him to this moment where his own daughter didn't believe she mattered enough to fight for. You're wrong, he said quietly. Alara looked up, surprised. You're wrong about me changing my mind. I was afraid, and fear makes people retreat into familiar patterns, but you do matter more than everything else. You should have always mattered more. Words, Alara said, but her voice was uncertain now, wanting to believe but terrified of hope. Then let me show you, Jamin said. Tomorrow morning, there's a board meeting where I'm supposed to explain myself, apologize, offer reassurance that this won't affect business. Instead, I'm going to tell them the truth, that I have a daughter, that she's brilliant and brave and everything I didn't know I wanted, and that anyone who has a problem with her existence can direct their concerns to me personally. Naomi's eyes widened. Jamin, that's career suicide. You'd be directly challenging your family, the board, everyone who holds power in your world. Maybe, he acknowledged, or maybe it's the first honest thing I've done in years. Either way, it's time to find out who I actually am when I'm not performing for everyone else's expectations. Alara was staring at him with an expression somewhere between disbelief and desperate hope. You'd really do that? Risk everything? I already lost everything that mattered when I walked away from you, Jamin said. Everything else is just compensation for that loss. Time to stop compensating and start living with the truth. The restaurant continued its evening rhythm around them, other diners laughing and eating and living their uncomplicated lives, while these three people sat in their booth negotiating the terms of a family that was being built backward, assembled from wreckage and absence and the fragile possibility of redemption. They finished the meal in subdued contemplation, each processing the weight of what had been said and what tomorrow would bring. When the check came, Jamin paid with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of commitment, of having crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Outside, the street had grown busier, Seoul's nightlife in full bloom. They stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, three people who were family in biology but strangers in practice, unsure how this evening was supposed to end. We have a hotel room, Naomi said, in Gangnam. We should probably head back, let Alara get some rest. It's been, she paused, searching for adequate words, an extraordinary day. Where are you staying? Jamin asked. I mean, which hotel? The Riverside Inn, Naomi said. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable. Jamin knew the place. A budget hotel near the river, the kind international travelers used when they wanted to save money for experiences rather than accommodations. The thought of his daughter staying there while he owned properties across the city, while empty rooms sat in his penthouse apartment, felt like another indictment of his choices. I have a better idea, he said. I have an apartment. It's large, too large for one person, really. Guest rooms that no one uses. If you're comfortable with it, you could stay there, both of you, for however long you're in Seoul. Naomi's expression was careful, evaluating. That's generous, but it's not generosity, Jamin interrupted. It's practicality. If I'm going to try to be present, if we're going to attempt to build something like a relationship, it'll be easier if we're not coordinating across the city through hotels and commutes. Or it'll be harder, Naomi said. Proximity doesn't guarantee connection. Sometimes it just magnifies dysfunction. Then we'll magnify it together, Jaemin said. But at least we'll be trying. Alara looked up at her mother with questioning eyes. Naomi sighed, reading the hope in her daughter's expression, understanding that saying no would feel like rejection when they'd had enough rejection for one lifetime. One condition, Naomi said. This isn't about money or comfort or what you can provide materially. We can leave at any time for any reason without explanation or guilt. This is an experiment, not a commitment. Agreed, Jaemin said quickly, before she could reconsider. They retrieved their minimal luggage from the hotel, one suitcase each, packed with the efficiency of people who'd learned to travel light to keep their lives portable in case they needed to disappear again. The contrast between their sparse belongings and the luxury of Jaemin's penthouse apartment was stark when they arrived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Han River, the city spread out below like a circuit board of light. Marble floors, designer furniture, artwork that cost more than most people earned in years. Everything clean and modern and utterly impersonal, the home of someone who lived at the office and slept in transit between obligations. Alara moved through the space with wide eyes, touching nothing, as if afraid her presence might contaminate the perfection. Naomi stood in the entrance, her worn coat and practical shoes at odds with the surroundings, looking like she was calculating whether this had been a mistake. Guest rooms are down that hallway, Jaemin said, gesturing. 2 of them, both with private baths. Take whichever you prefer. There's food in the kitchen, though I'll admit most of it was stocked by my housekeeper, and I'm not sure what's actually there. We can figure it out, Naomi said, her voice holding the careful neutrality of someone determined not to be impressed or intimidated. Thank you for this. Whatever happens, this kindness, it matters. It's not kindness, Jaemin said. It's late rent on 10 years of absence. They settled into an awkward routine, Naomi helping Alara unpack in one of the guest rooms while Jaemin stood uselessly in the hallway, wanting to help but not knowing how. Eventually, he retreated to his own room, the master suite that suddenly felt excessive and lonely, and sat on the edge of his bed with his phone in his hands. Messages continued to flood in, his mother demanding he come home immediately for a family meeting, Jiwoo's father requesting a call to discuss the engagement, board members asking pointed questions about leadership stability, PR advisors offering strategic guidance that all boiled down to the same message: contain, minimize, control. But beneath all those professional concerns was a message from Jiwoo herself, simple and devastating. I saw the photos from dinner. You looked happy, happier than I've ever seen you with me. I think that tells us everything we need to know. Jaemin stared at those words, feeling the weight of truth in them. He'd spent 2 years with Jiwoo, planning a merger disguised as a marriage, performing compatibility while avoiding intimacy. Tonight, in a small restaurant with a daughter he barely knew and a woman he'd abandoned, he'd felt something he couldn't name but recognized as more authentic than anything in his carefully constructed life. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting Naomi. Instead, Alara appeared in the doorway, changed into pajamas that were worn but clean, her hair damp from a shower. She looked even smaller in the oversized doorframe, a child navigating an adult world that hadn't made space for her. "Can't sleep?" Jaemin asked gently. "Different bed," Alara said. "Different city. Different everything." She paused, then added, "Mum's asleep. She was exhausted. Today was hard for her too, even if she doesn't show it." "I imagine it was," Jaemin said. "Your mother is remarkably strong." "She had to be," Alara said simply, "because you weren't." The words weren't cruel, just factual. A child's honest assessment of adult failures. She moved into the room, looking around with that same careful attention she brought to everything. "This place is huge," she observed. "Do you live here alone?" "I do." "Seems lonely." "It is," Jaemin admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "I always told myself I preferred it. The quiet, the control, the lack of complications. But maybe I was just afraid of what it would mean to share space with someone who could see past the performance." Alara considered this, then moved to the windows overlooking the river. The city lights reflected in her eyes, making her look older than her years. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "At the meeting with your board?" I'm going to tell them the truth, Jamin said, that I have a daughter, that she matters more than their comfort or the company's stock price, that anyone who can't accept that should start looking for new leadership. And if they fire you, then I'll figure out who I am without the title, Jamin said. Maybe that's long overdue anyway. Alara turned from the window, her expression serious. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. You're not the reason, Jamin said firmly. My choices are the reason. My cowardice 10 years ago, my continued avoidance, my prioritization of image over integrity, those are the reasons. You're just the catalyst that's finally forcing me to face consequences I should have faced long ago. But still, Alara. He moved closer, crouching to her eye level as he had before. Listen to me. You are not a burden. You are not a problem. You are not a complication or a scandal or a mistake. You are my daughter, and that is the truest, most important thing I've learned in years. Everything else is just noise. Tears gathered in her eyes again, and this time she didn't fight them. I wanted you to say that, she whispered. For so long, I just wanted to hear that I wasn't a mistake. You're not, Jamin said, feeling his own eyes burn. You're the best thing I never knew I had. And I'm sorry, so deeply sorry, that it took me this long to recognize it. She moved then, closing the distance between them and wrapping her arms around his neck in a fierce hug that spoke of years of wanting and waiting and hoping against hope. Jamin held her carefully, terrified of breaking this fragile trust, feeling the weight of her small body against him and understanding with devastating clarity what he'd missed, what he'd lost, what he'd almost never known. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and daughter meeting for the first time in 10 years, building a bridge across an ocean of absence one heartbeat at a time. When Alara finally pulled back, her eyes were red, but her expression was lighter, some burden lifted. I should sleep, she said. Tomorrow is going to be intense. It is, Jamin agreed, but we'll face it together, all three of us. She nodded and moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing up. Even if it's late, even if it's messy. Thank you for finally showing up. After she left, Jamin sat alone in his bedroom overlooking the river, feeling the full weight of what tomorrow would bring. The board meeting at 9. The confrontation with his parents, the unraveling of the life he'd carefully constructed, the potential loss of everything he'd built his identity around. But against all that, he had something new. A daughter who'd hugged him, a woman who'd been brave enough to demand he face the truth, and the strange, terrifying freedom of choosing honesty over convenience. His phone buzzed one more time. A message from his mother. Last chance to fix this quietly. Come home. Let us help you. Don't throw away everything we've built for pride. Jamin read the message, considered his response, then did something he'd never done before in his entire adult life. He deleted it without responding and turned off his phone completely. No more messages, no more pressure, no more voices telling him who he should be or what he should prioritize. Just silence. And in that silence, the sound of his own breathing, the distant hum of the city below. The knowledge that down the hall, his daughter was sleeping under his roof, finally where she belonged. He lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling, and waited for tomorrow to come. Morning came too quickly, dawn breaking over Seoul with indifferent beauty. Jamin woke to the smell of coffee brewing, an unfamiliar domesticity in an apartment that usually remained silent until his housekeeper arrived at 9. He emerged from his bedroom to find Naomi in the kitchen, navigating the expensive appliances with determined competence, while Alara sat at the breakfast bar with a book open in front of her. You didn't have to do this, Jamin said, gesturing to the coffee pot and the simple breakfast she'd assembled from whatever she'd found in his sparse pantry. I know, Naomi replied, pouring him a cup without asking if he wanted one. But sitting around waiting for your life to implode felt counterproductive. Keeping busy helps. Alara looked up from her book. Something advanced, pages dense with text that seemed far beyond elementary school level. What time is the meeting? She asked. 9 o'clock, Jamin said, accepting the coffee gratefully. At headquarters. The full board of directors. And you're really going to tell them about me? Her voice held both hope and fear, as if she still couldn't quite believe he'd follow through. I'm really going to tell them about you, he confirmed. About us. About everything. Naomi leaned against the counter, studying him with those sharp eyes that saw through performance to truth. You understand what you're risking. This isn't just a symbolic gesture. You could lose control of your own company. Your parents hold significant shares, and if they unite the board against you, then I'll deal with those consequences, Jamin interrupted. I've spent my entire adult life calculating risks and managing outcomes. For once, I'm going to do what's right and let the chips fall where they will. Very noble, Naomi said, but there was warmth beneath the sarcasm. Let's hope nobility pays better than I remember. They fell into an awkward silence, the three of them existing in this strange bubble of tentative family while the clock ticked toward confrontation. Jamin showered and dressed in his usual armor, tailored suit, expensive watch, the physical manifestations of success and control. But when he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw something different than usual. Not the CEO, not the Han heir, just a man about to fight for his daughter. By 8:30, they were in the car heading toward Orion Dynamics. Jamin had arranged for Naomi and Alara to wait in his private office during the board meeting, close enough to feel supported, far enough to avoid direct crossfire. As they pulled up to the building, he could see the media presence had increased overnight. News vans lined the street, cameras positioned to capture anyone entering or leaving the headquarters. They're like vultures, Alara observed, pressing her face against the window, waiting for someone to fall apart so they can document it. That's the nature of public life, Jamin said. Everything is performance. Everything is content. Everything is consumable. Sounds exhausting, Alara said. It is, he admitted, more than you know. They entered through the underground garage to avoid the cameras, taking the private elevator directly to the executive floor. Mincio was waiting when the doors opened, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes betraying stress. They're already gathering in the boardroom, she reported. Your parents arrived 15 minutes ago. The full board is present, plus legal counsel. Mr. Han, they've prepared a resolution. I don't want to know, Jamin said, cutting her off. Whatever they've planned, whatever strategy they've developed, I don't want it in my head before I walk in there. Mincio nodded, understanding. Her eyes flickered to Naomi and Alara, curiosity and concern mixing in her gaze. Should I arrange refreshments for your guests? Please, Jamin said. And Mincio? Whatever happens in that meeting, whatever you hear, I need you to know that I'm making the choice I should have made 10 years ago, even if it looks like career suicide. Understood, sir, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I think courage is underrated in corporate leadership. He led Naomi and Alara to his office, the space suddenly feeling like a sanctuary rather than a workplace. The city sprawled beyond the windows, indifferent to the personal dramas playing out in its towers. Alara immediately gravitated to the bookshelves, scanning titles with that hungry intelligence that seemed to define her. We'll be fine here, Naomi said, reading Jamin's hesitation. Go do what you need to do. We've waited 10 years. We can wait another hour. If it goes badly, Jamin started. If it goes badly, we'll still be here, Naomi finished. That's what family does. They wait. They stay. They don't disappear when things get difficult. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning, a pointed reminder of what he'd failed to do before. Jamin nodded, unable to find adequate response, and left them in his office while he walked down the hall toward the boardroom where his future waited. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. A long table of polished wood, leather chairs that cost more than most cars, walls lined with awards and achievements that documented the Han family's rise to power. 14 board members were already seated, conversations dying as Jamin entered. His parents sat at the far end, his mother's expression carved from ice, his father's face unreadable. Good morning, Jamin said, moving to his usual seat at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming on short notice. Let's dispense with pleasantries, said Director Kim, one of the oldest board members and a close ally of Jamin's father. We're here to address the situation that's dominating headlines and threatening to destabilize this company. The appearance of a woman and child claiming connection to you, the DNA test results that apparently confirm paternity, and your very public acknowledgement yesterday that has created significant PR crisis. It's not a PR crisis, Jamin said calmly. It's the truth emerging after years of being buried. Truth is irrelevant when it damages shareholder value, Director Park interjected, a woman known for ruthless pragmatism. Our stock dropped 3% yesterday. We've received calls from partners expressing concern about leadership stability. The Singapore expansion is now under review by investors who question whether this company can be trusted to maintain focus during personal upheaval. Then perhaps those investors need to reconsider what kind of leadership they actually value, Jamin said. Leadership that lies and hides and prioritizes image over integrity, or leadership that faces difficult truths honestly? This isn't about philosophy, his mother said sharply, speaking for the first time. This is about protecting everything this family has built. Jamin, we're prepared to offer a solution. Financial support for the child and her mother, structured through trusts that ensure their security while maintaining appropriate boundaries. A public statement acknowledging past relationship, but emphasizing your commitment to current obligations. Strategic management of the narrative that minimizes damage while still addressing the situation. In other words, Jamin said, money and spin. Pay them off and control the story. Exactly what you tried 10 years ago. What worked 10 years ago, his father corrected, until that woman decided one payoff wasn't enough and came back for more. The characterization of Naomi as mercenary and opportunistic sent rage flooding through Jamin's veins. She didn't come back for money. She came back because our daughter deserves to know her father, because she spent a decade raising my child alone while I pretended that part of my life didn't exist, because she's braver than I've ever been. So this is about redemption, Director Kim said dismissively. Personal absolution at the company's expense. Very noble, but board members have fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, not to your guilty conscience. My guilty conscience isn't your concern, Jamin agreed, but my fitness as CEO should be. And I'm telling you right now, if my leadership is so fragile that acknowledging my own daughter destroys it, then perhaps I was never the right person for this position. Silence fell over the boardroom, heavy and dangerous. His mother's face had gone pale. His father's jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The other board members exchanged glances, calculating, assessing, determining which way the power would shift. Are you threatening to resign? Director Park asked carefully. I'm saying I refuse to lead this company based on lies, Jamin said. I have a 10-year-old daughter named Alara. She's brilliant, brave, and deserves better than a father who's ashamed of her existence. If this board cannot accept that simple truth, if you need a CEO who will prioritize corporate image over basic human decency, then yes, I'll resign. But I won't be extorted into denial anymore. You're being emotional, his mother said, her voice tight. Making dramatic declarations instead of thinking strategically about long-term implications. I've been thinking strategically my entire life, Jamin shot back. And it's led me here, to a place where my own daughter had to fly across the world to force me to acknowledge she exists. So forgive me if I'm done with strategy and ready to try something radical, like honesty. Honesty doesn't pay dividends, Director Kim muttered. Neither does moral bankruptcy, Jamin countered. But it does corrode everything it touches. This company was founded on principles of ethical technology development, transparent AI systems, algorithmic fairness. We built our reputation on being better than competitors who cut corners and hide inconvenient truths. And yet when it comes to my personal life, you want me to do exactly what we condemn in others. Bury the truth, manage perception, prioritize image over integrity. The argument landed with visible impact. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the hypocrisy he was highlighting. Orion Dynamics had made billions positioning itself as the ethical alternative in tech development, the company that prioritized societal good over pure profit. Having its CEO exposed as someone who'd abandoned his child while preaching corporate responsibility created cognitive dissonance that couldn't be easily dismissed. There's a difference between corporate ethics and personal mistakes, Director Lee, one of the younger board members, said carefully. We can acknowledge that your past choices were regrettable while still insisting on damage control for present circumstances. But that's the point, Jamin pressed. Personal mistakes have corporate implications when they reveal character. If I'm capable of abandoning my own daughter, what does that say about my commitment to any other responsibility? If I'll lie about something this fundamental, how can you trust me with billions in assets and thousands of employees' livelihoods? The logic was turning against them, and he could see it in their faces. His mother looked furious, his father calculating new approaches. The other board members were wavering, caught between practical concerns and the philosophical trap he'd set. "What exactly are you proposing?" Director Park asked. "That we simply accept this situation without any management strategy? That we tell investors and partners to embrace uncertainty while you navigate personal drama?" "I'm proposing transparency," Jamin said. "A public statement acknowledging that I have a daughter, that I was absent from her life due to my own failings, and that I'm committed to being present moving forward. No spin, no management, just truth. Then we let the market and our partners decide if that honesty is worth supporting." "That's insane," his mother said flatly. "You'll destroy your credibility." "My credibility was already destroyed," Jamin said quietly. "I just hid it well. This is about rebuilding it on actual foundation instead of carefully maintained lies." The door to the boardroom suddenly opened without warning. Mincio appeared, her face stricken, and behind her, Naomi stood in the doorway, Alara's hand clasped tightly in hers. But it was Alara's face that made Jamin's heart stop. She'd been crying, her eyes red and swollen, her expression devastated. "What happened?" Jamin was on his feet immediately, moving toward them. "She heard," Naomi said, her voice shaking with fury. "Someone, one of your people, came to your office and spoke to us. Told Alara that she was a complication that would be handled appropriately. Used language that made it very clear she was unwanted burden rather than human child." Jamin's blood went cold. He turned back to the boardroom, scanning faces, looking for guilt or discomfort. His mother's expression was carefully blank. Too carefully. "Who?" he demanded. "Who went to my office?" "Does it matter?" his mother said coolly. "Someone was trying to assess the situation, understand what we're dealing with. Surely you can't expect—" "You sent someone to intimidate my daughter?" Jamin's voice was dangerously quiet. "While I was in here defending her right to exist, you sent someone to make sure she knew she wasn't welcome." "I sent someone to offer practical solutions," his mother corrected. "To explain to the woman that there were civilized ways to handle this that didn't require public spectacle or corporate upheaval. If the child overheard and misunderstood—" "I didn't misunderstand," Alara said, her voice small but clear. She spoke in Korean, addressing the entire room with a composure that was heartbreaking in someone so young. "The man said I was a mistake that should have stayed buried. He said my mother was opportunistic and that I was being used as leverage. He said the Han family had dealt with problems like me before and would deal with me now." The silence that followed was absolute. Every board member was staring at Han Soo-min with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. This had crossed a line even corporate pragmatism couldn't justify, threatening a child, using intimidation tactics against someone who had no power or protection. "Is this true?" Director Park asked, her voice sharp. "Soo-min, did you authorize someone to speak to the child?" "I authorized an assessment of the situation," Soo-min said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "If the execution was heavy-handed—" "Heavy-handed?" Naomi's fury was incandescent. "You sent someone to terrorize a 10-year-old child, to make sure she understood that her existence was inconvenient to powerful people who could hurt her. That's not assessment, that's emotional abuse." Jamin moved to Alara, kneeling before her as he had before, but this time his hands were shaking with rage. "I'm so sorry," he said. "Whatever was said to you, whoever said it, they don't speak for me. You are not a mistake. You are not a problem. You are my daughter, and anyone who threatens you answers to me." "But they do speak for your family," Alara said, tears streaming down her face now. "They speak for the people you care about, the people whose opinions matter to you, and they made it very clear that I don't belong in your world, that I never will, that I'm just something to be managed and minimized and pushed back into invisibility." "No," Jamin said firmly. "They speak for who my family has been. Not who we're going to be, not anymore." He stood and turned back to the boardroom, his decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. "I'm done," he said simply. Effective immediately, I resign as CEO of Orion Dynamics. The announcement detonated in the stunned silence. His father shot to his feet. Jamin, don't be... I'm done, Jamin repeated, his voice carrying a finality that stopped all protests. I will not lead a company that operates this way. I will not represent a family that treats children as problems to be solved. I will not continue pretending that success built on cruelty and manipulation is success worth having. You're throwing away everything, his mother said, her voice breaking for the first time. Everything we built, everything we sacrificed. You sacrificed my daughter, Jamin said, 10 years ago and again today. That's not sacrifice. That's cruelty disguised as pragmatism. And I won't be part of it anymore. Director Park was rapidly consulting with the legal counsel, whispered conversations about succession protocols and emergency procedures. Other board members sat frozen, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented situation. The Han family's control of Orion Dynamics had been absolute for 3 generations, until this moment. If you resign, you lose everything, his father said, trying one final time. Your position, your influence, your legacy. Everything you've worked for. I didn't work for this, Jamin said, gesturing to the boardroom, the company, the empire. You worked for this. I just inherited it and pretended it was mine. But I'm not willing to keep pretending, not at this cost. He turned to Director Park, the closest thing to an ally he had in the room. I'll prepare a formal resignation letter by end of day. Min Seo can help facilitate the transition. I'd recommend promoting Director Chen to interim CEO. She has the technical knowledge and the moral clarity this company needs. This is insane, Director Kim sputtered. You can't just walk away from... I can, Jae-min said simply. And I am. This meeting is adjourned. He walked out of the boardroom without waiting for dismissal, moving directly to where Naomi and Alara stood. Alara was still crying, her small frame shaking with the aftermath of fear and hurt. Jamin picked her up without asking permission, lifting her into his arms the way he should have done years ago, feeling her weight settle against him with devastating rightness. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. Not for any boardroom, not for any empire, not for anything. They left Orion Dynamics together through the front entrance this time, cameras flashing as they emerged into morning sunlight. Jae-min didn't hide his face or shield Alara from the lenses. He walked with his daughter in his arms and her mother at his side, letting the whole world see what he'd tried to hide, claiming publicly what he'd denied privately for too long. The media shouted questions about his resignation, about the child, about what this meant for the company. Jae-min ignored all of it, focused only on getting Alara to the car, getting her somewhere safe where the damage could be assessed and addressed. In the car, finally away from cameras and boardrooms and family judgment, Alara's tears slowed. She sat pressed against Jae-min's side, Naomi on her other side, the 3 of them creating a small fortress against the world. You quit, Alara said, her voice wondering. You actually quit. I did, Jae-min confirmed, because of me. Because of us, he corrected. Because being your father matters more than being their CEO. Because I'd rather have one honest relationship than 100 powerful ones built on lies. But what will you do? Alara asked. Without the company, without your position, who are you? It was the question that had terrified him for decades, the fear that had kept him trapped in roles and responsibilities he'd never truly chosen. But sitting in this car with his daughter asking him directly, the fear dissolved into something unexpected. Curiosity. Who was he without the title, without the legacy, without the armor of success? I don't know, he admitted. But I'm looking forward to finding out. With you, if you'll let me. Alara looked up at him, searching his face for deception or performance. Finding only truth, something in her expression softened. Okay, she said quietly. We can figure it out together. Naomi was watching this exchange with tears in her own eyes now, emotion finally breaking through her carefully maintained composure. You really did it, she said to Jae-min. You actually chose her. I should have done it 10 years ago, Jae-min said, but I'm doing it now, and I'll keep doing it every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes to make up for the time I lost. The car continued through Seoul's streets, carrying them away from Orion Dynamics and everything it represented. Behind them, the company would be in chaos. Emergency meetings, succession planning, damage control. The media would feast on the story for days. His parents would be furious, betrayed, likely never forgive him. But ahead of them lay something unprecedented in Jamin's carefully controlled life: uncertainty. The freedom and terror of not knowing what came next. The possibility of building something real instead of inheriting something hollow. The chance to be chosen rather than entitled, to earn rather than inherit, to become rather than perform. His phone was ringing again, probably his parents, probably the board, probably everyone who wanted to convince him he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Jae-min powered it off without looking, the same choice he'd made last night, committing to silence over noise, to presence over management. "Where are we going?" the driver asked, the first time he'd spoken during this entire chaotic morning. Jae-min looked at Naomi and Alara, his family, in all the ways that actually mattered. "Home," he said simply. "We're going home." And for the first time in 10 years, he actually knew what that word meant. The apartment felt different when they returned. No longer a showcase of wealth and success, but simply a space where three people were learning to exist together. Alara had retreated to her room, exhausted from the morning's emotional devastation, while Naomi made tea in the kitchen with movements that suggested she needed something to occupy her hands, while her mind processed everything that had just happened. Jamin stood at the windows overlooking the Han River, watching the city move through its day with complete indifference to the fact that his entire life had just imploded. Somewhere in those towers, his parents were strategizing damage control. Somewhere in corporate offices, lawyers were drafting succession documents. Somewhere in newsrooms, journalists were crafting headlines about the tech CEO who'd walked away from billions for a daughter he'd never acknowledged. "You're having second thoughts," Naomi said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of tea. It wasn't a question. "No," Jamin said, accepting one of the cups. "I'm having first thoughts. Maybe the first honest thoughts I've had in years. About who I actually am without the title, without the family legacy defining me." "And who is that?" Naomi asked, settling into the chair near the window. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'm tired of performing someone else's version of success. My grandfather built the company. My father expanded it. I was just maintaining their vision, following their blueprint. I never asked myself what I actually wanted." "What do you want?" Naomi's voice was gentle, genuinely curious. Jae-min considered the question, really considered it for perhaps the first time in his adult life. "I want to know my daughter," he said finally. "I want to understand what makes her laugh, what scares her, what she dreams about. I want to be present for her life instead of learning about it through missed milestones and secondhand stories." "That's a start," Naomi said, "but it's not a plan. You just walked away from everything that defined you. At some point, you'll need to figure out what comes next." "I know." Jamin sipped his tea, feeling the warmth spread through him. "But for now, I just want to be here, fully here. Not planning or strategizing or calculating outcomes, just present." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the river flow below. Eventually, Naomi spoke again, her voice carrying a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. "I need to tell you something I should have told you yesterday, but didn't want to complicate things further." Jamin turned to look at her, seeing tension in her shoulders. "What is it?" "Alara is sick," Naomi said quietly. "Not seriously, not immediately dangerous, but she has a congenital heart condition that requires monitoring. She'll need surgery eventually, probably within the next few years, to repair a valve that's not functioning properly. The doctors in London have been managing it with medication and regular checkups, but the surgery is expensive, prohibitively expensive, even with insurance." The revelation hit Jamin like a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me immediately? Yesterday, when you first came to the building, this should have been the first thing you said." "Because I didn't want you to help us out of guilt or obligation," Naomi said firmly. "I wanted you to choose Alara because she's your daughter, not because she needs something from you. We've managed this long. We would have continued managing. But now that you know, I won't hide it. She needs the surgery within 2 years. We were saving for it, but medical costs in the UK keep rising and—" "She'll have the surgery," Jamin interrupted. "The best surgeons, the best facility, whatever she needs. I'll arrange everything." "That's exactly what I was afraid of," Naomi said, but there was no anger in it, just tired resignation. You swooping in with money to fix problems, feeling like that absolves the absence. But Jaemin, she doesn't need a checkbook. She needs a father. Someone who'll sit with her before the surgery, who'll hold her hand when she's scared, who'll be there during recovery. Money is easy. Presence is hard. "Then I'll be present," Jaemin said. "For the surgery, for the recovery, for everything. But I'm not going to pretend financial resources aren't relevant when my daughter needs medical care I can provide." "Our daughter?" Naomi corrected gently. "She's ours. Not yours to fix or mine to manage alone. Ours to raise together, however imperfectly." The word "together" hung in the air between them, carrying implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Before Jaemin could respond, Ilara appeared in the doorway, her eyes still red, but her expression more composed. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Too much in my head." "Come here," Jaemin said, gesturing to the empty chair. Ilara moved to it hesitantly, curling into the seat with her knees drawn up, making herself small. "I heard what Mum said," Ilara admitted, "about my heart. I know I wasn't supposed to be listening, but the apartment isn't that big, and you weren't exactly whispering." Naomi sighed. "Ilara." "It's okay," Ilara interrupted. "I know about the surgery. I've known for a while. The doctors talk to me like I'm a person capable of understanding my own medical condition, which is more than most adults do." She looked at Jaemin directly. "I don't want you to help because you feel guilty about my heart. That's not why we came here." "Why did you come here?" Jaemin asked. "Really, what did you hope would happen?" Ilara was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with that serious intensity she brought to everything. "I wanted to see if you were worth knowing," she said finally. "Mom always told me you probably had reasons for leaving, that maybe you weren't a bad person, just a scared one. But I needed to see for myself, to meet you and decide if having a father was better than having the idea of one." "And?" Jaemin's voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you decide?" "I decided you're human," Ilara said, "flawed and scared and trying. Not perfect, but maybe willing to be better. That's more than I expected." The simple honesty of children, cutting through complexity to essential truth. Jaemin felt tears threatening for the first time since this ordeal began, the weight of her forgiveness almost harder to bear than her anger would have been. "I don't deserve that," he said. "Your willingness to see good in me after everything I put you through." "Probably not," Ilara agreed, "but I'm giving it anyway. Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I'm tired of being angry at someone I've never really known." A knock at the apartment door interrupted the moment. Jaemin frowned. No one should be able to access this floor without clearance from building security. He moved to the door cautiously, checking the security screen to see who'd managed to bypass protocols. Jiwoo stood in the hallway, dressed impeccably as always, but her face showed evidence of a sleepless night. Jaemin opened the door, surprised to see her. "I needed to see you," Jiwoo said without preamble, "to say goodbye properly." "Jiwoo, you didn't have to come here. I was going to call." "I know," she interrupted, stepping into the apartment uninvited but not unwelcome. Her eyes found Naomi and Ilara in the living area, taking them in with an expression that was curious rather than hostile. "So this is your family?" "Yes," Jaemin said simply. "This is Naomi and Ilara." Jiwoo moved closer, studying Ilara with frank interest. "You look exactly like him," she observed. "It must be strange carrying someone's face like that." "It's the only face I've ever had," Ilara replied, not intimidated. "So it's not strange to me, just reality." Jiwoo smiled slightly, appreciating the response. She turned to Naomi. "You raised a remarkable child, brave enough to cross the world to find her father. That takes courage most adults don't possess." "She gets that from her mother," Jaemin said quietly. "I'm sure," Jiwoo agreed. She turned back to Jaemin, her expression softening. "I came to return this." She removed her engagement ring, the massive diamond catching light as she held it out. "And to tell you that I'm not angry, hurt, yes. Disappointed that we wasted 2 years pretending we were building something real, but not angry." Jaemin accepted the ring, feeling its weight in his palm, the physical manifestation of a future that had never been authentic. "I'm sorry," he said. "You deserve better than someone going through the motions." "We both deserve better," Jiwoo corrected. "We were both performing, you as the perfect heir, me as the perfect match. Neither of us was brave enough to admit it wasn't real until circumstances forced the truth." She glanced at Alara again. "But she's real. You're feeling for her. That's the most honest I've ever seen you. So thank you for that, at least, for showing me what genuine emotion looks like, even if it wasn't directed at me." "What will you do?" Jaemin asked. "Your family? They'll be furious about the broken engagement." "They'll survive," Jiwoo said with a shrug. "And honestly, I'm relieved. I've spent my entire life living up to family expectations, just like you. Maybe it's time we both figured out who we actually are instead of who we're supposed to be." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. The brave one. I hope it works out for you." She left as abruptly as she'd arrived, the door closing with quiet finality. Jaemin stood holding the ring, processing this final severance of his old life. When he returned to the living area, Naomi was watching him with an unreadable expression. "She seemed nice," Naomi observed, surprisingly understanding given the circumstances. "She was trapped too," Jaemin said, "in a different way, but trapped nonetheless. Maybe she sees my escape as permission for her own." The rest of the day unfolded with strange normality. They ordered food and ate together, the conversation moving from heavy topics to lighter ones. Alara's favorite subjects at school, Naomi's consulting work, the cultural differences between London and Seoul. It felt like practice for being a family, awkward but genuine, everyone trying to figure out their roles in this unprecedented configuration. That evening, as Seoul's lights began glittering in the darkness, Jaemin's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Han, this is Director Chen from Orion Dynamics." Her voice was professional but warm. "I wanted to reach out personally regarding your resignation." "Director Chen," Jaemin said, moving to the bedroom for privacy. "I apologize for the chaos I've left behind. The company deserves better than—" "The company deserves leadership with integrity," Chen interrupted gently. "Which is why the board met this afternoon and voted unanimously to reject your resignation." Jaemin stopped breathing. "What?" "After you left, several board members expressed concern about how the situation was handled, particularly regarding your daughter," Chen explained. Director Park was especially vocal about the ethical implications of prioritizing corporate image over basic human decency. She pointed out that everything you said in the meeting was correct. "We've built our reputation on ethical leadership, and your actions this morning demonstrated more ethical courage than years of corporate policy statements." "But your parents abstained from the vote," Chen said. "After some rather pointed discussion about their role in this morning's incident with your daughter, they recognized that continuing to oppose you would damage the company more than supporting you. The board agreed that your personal growth and commitment to honesty is exactly the kind of leadership Orion Dynamics needs, especially now." Jaemin sat on the edge of his bed, trying to process this unexpected turn. "So what happens now?" "Now you take some time off," Chen said firmly. "Real time, not performative absence. Spend it with your daughter. Figure out how to be her father. When you're ready to return, if you're ready to return, the company will be here. But we're not going to force you back into a role you're not ready for, or that doesn't fit who you're becoming." "That's remarkably understanding," Jaemin said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what actual ethical leadership looks like," Chen replied. "We learned it from watching you walk away this morning rather than compromise your values. Now we're applying those same principles. Take care of your family, Jaemin. The company will manage." After the call ended, Jaemin sat in silence for a long time, feeling the weight of grace he hadn't expected and possibly didn't deserve. When he returned to the living area, Naomi and Alara were watching a movie on the television, curled together on the couch in comfortable proximity. "The company rejected my resignation," he said quietly. Naomi looked up, surprised. "They're giving me time to figure things out. To be here, with both of you, without the pressure of corporate obligations." "And what do you want to do with that time?" Naomi asked. Jaemin looked at Alara, whose attention was still mostly on the movie, but whose posture suggested she was listening carefully. "I want to start over," he said.
Not erasing the past, but building something new. I want to learn how to be your father, Alara. Really be it, not just perform it. I want to understand who you are, what matters to you, what you need from me. That's going to take more than a few weeks, Alara said, finally turning to look at him fully. I know, Jaemin agreed. It's going to take years, maybe forever. But I have time now. Real time, not stolen moments between meetings, and I want to spend it with you. What about London? Naomi asked. We have lives there, jobs, school, commitments we can't just abandon. Then we figure it out together, Jaemin said. Maybe you stay in Seoul for a while. Let Alara experience this part of her heritage. Maybe I visit London regularly, become part of your world instead of demanding you fit into mine. Maybe we find some hybrid that works for all of us. But the point is, we figure it out, together, as a family. The word still felt strange in his mouth, but less strange than it had yesterday. Family wasn't something you inherited or performed. It was something you built through daily choices, through presence, through showing up even when it was difficult. The next few weeks unfolded in a rhythm that was entirely new to Jaemin. He woke to find Alara already reading at the breakfast table, her brilliant mind absorbing information with hungry efficiency. He learned that she loved mathematics but hated literature analysis, that she could explain quantum theory concepts but struggled with social dynamics, that she was simultaneously younger and older than her years. They explored Seoul together, not the corporate soul of boardrooms and power lunches, but the hidden soul of neighborhood markets and small museums and parks, where ordinary families spent ordinary days. Naomi documented these excursions with her phone camera, capturing moments that felt precious because they were unremarkable. Jaemin helping Alara fly a kite. Alara teaching Jaemin British slang that made no sense in Korean context. The three of them laughing over failed attempts to cook traditional Korean dishes from online recipes. During these weeks, Jaemin's parents reached out once, a stiff, formal dinner invitation that felt more like a negotiation summons than family outreach. They went, all three of them, walking into the Han family mansion where Jaemin had grown up with the protective formation of people who'd learned to stand together. The dinner was awkward, tension simmering beneath polite conversation. Han Soo-min was coldly cordial to Naomi, her disappointment at her son's choices barely concealed. Han Tae-sung was slightly warmer, asking Alara about her education with what seemed like genuine interest, though his questions carried the assessment of someone evaluating potential rather than connecting with a person. But it was Alara who changed the evening's trajectory. Midway through the meal, during a particularly strained silence, she spoke directly to her grandparents in flawless Korean. I understand you don't want me, she said, her voice clear and steady. I understand I represent choices you didn't approve of and consequences you tried to prevent. But I exist anyway, and I'm going to keep existing, whether you acknowledge me or not. The question isn't whether I'm part of this family. The question is whether you want to be part of mine.
Mathematisch.
The simple reversal of power, this child claiming agency, claiming choice, refusing to beg for acceptance, shifted something fundamental in the room. Soo-min's facade cracked slightly, something like respect flickering in her expression. Tae-sung actually smiled, recognizing in his granddaughter the same steel that had built empires. You have your father's stubbornness, Tae-sung observed. And my mother's courage, Alara countered, which is probably a better inheritance than money or corporate shares. After that dinner, the relationship remained complicated, but began evolving towards something functional. Soo-min would never be a warm grandmother, but she began sending Alara books, advanced mathematics texts, coding tutorials, materials that acknowledged the girl's intellectual gifts. Tae-sung started calling weekly, ostensibly to speak with Jaemin about company matters, but always asking to speak with Alara afterward, their conversations growing longer and more personal. 2 months after Naomi and Alara had first walked into Orion Dynamics, they sat together in a doctor's office in Seoul's most prestigious medical facility. The cardiac surgeon, one of Asia's finest, was reviewing Alara's case with careful attention. The surgery is definitely needed, the surgeon confirmed, but not urgently. We can schedule it for 6 months from now, give her time to grow a bit more, strengthen her system. The procedure has a very high success rate,
and with proper post-operative care, she should have completely normal heart function. Alara listened to this clinical discussion of her own body with that same serious focus she brought to everything. When the surgeon asked if she had questions, she had many, detailed, technical questions that made the doctor smile with professional appreciation. "You'd make an excellent physician," the surgeon said. "I'm thinking about biomedical engineering," Alara replied. "Building better artificial organs, developing more precise surgical tools, helping doctors like you save more people." After the appointment, walking back to the car through Seoul's afternoon crowds, Jaemin felt Alara slip her hand into his. The gesture was casual, unconscious, a daughter holding her father's hand while crossing a busy street, but it represented everything that had changed. Trust, built slowly through consistent presence. Connection, earned through daily choices to show up and stay. Family, created not through biology alone, but through deliberate commitment. That evening, with Alara asleep in her room and Naomi working on her laptop at the dining table, Jaemin found himself thinking about the future in ways he never had before. Not strategic planning or outcome calculation, but genuine wondering about what came next. "I've been thinking," he said to Naomi, who looked up from her screen, "about London, about Seoul, about how we make this work long term." "And?" Naomi prompted. "What if you stayed?" Jaemin asked. "Not forever, not as some grand commitment, but for a year. Let Alara experience living here, going to school here, being part of both cultures. I could set you up with consulting clients here. Seoul's digital sector is booming, and your expertise in ethical tech development is exactly what companies need. You'd be independent, building your own practice, not dependent on me financially." "And what would you be doing during this hypothetical year?" Naomi asked carefully. "Learning to be a father," Jaemin said. "Really learning it. Being present for homework and doctor's appointments and ordinary days. Figuring out who I am without the CEO title defining me. The board gave me time. I want to use it to build something real with Alara before I decide whether to return to corporate leadership." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, considering. "That's a big ask." "Uprooting our entire lives, taking Alara out of her school, leaving our support system in London."
"I know," Jaemin acknowledged, "and I'll understand if you say no. But Naomi, these past 2 months, they've been the most genuine of my life. I've learned more about what matters, about who I want to be, than in all my years of corporate success. And most of that learning comes from watching you parent, from seeing how you've raised this extraordinary child despite every obstacle I created." "So this is about learning from me?" Naomi asked, but there was amusement in her tone. "This is about building something together," Jaemin said. "Not a romantic relationship, we're not those people anymore, and that's okay. But a real co-parenting partnership, 2 people committed to raising a child who deserves both of us, who needs both of us, who shouldn't have to choose between her worlds." "Can I think about it?" Naomi asked. "Take all the time you need," Jaemin said. "Just know that whatever you decide, I'm going to keep showing up. Whether that's visiting London every month or moving there myself eventually, I'm done being absent from my daughter's life." 3 days later, Naomi gave her answer. They would stay in Seoul for 1 year on a trial basis. Alara would enroll in an international school that could accommodate her advanced intellect and her dual heritage. Naomi would establish her consulting practice with connections Jaemin could facilitate, but work she would own entirely. And they would figure out, day by day, how to be a family that didn't fit traditional molds, but worked for them. The year that followed was transformative in ways none of them could have predicted. Alara thrived at her new school, finding peers who challenged her intellectually and teachers who recognized her gifts. She started a coding club and joined the mathematics team, her confidence growing as she found spaces where her brilliance was celebrated rather than making her an outsider. Naomi's consulting practice exceeded expectations. Seoul's tech sector was indeed hungry for ethical guidance, and her expertise, combined with her outsider perspective, made her invaluable to companies trying to navigate algorithmic bias and AI transparency issues. She built something entirely her own, independent of Jaemin's connections or resources, proving what she'd always known. She was capable of extraordinary things when given the opportunity. And Jaemin learned what it meant to be a father. Not the performative version he'd seen modeled, where success in the boardroom substituted for presence at home, but the daily, unglamorous reality of parenting.
He learned that being there for homework frustrations mattered more than solving problems for her. He learned that listening without fixing was sometimes what she needed most. He learned that love wasn't something you proved through grand gestures, but through small, consistent choices to prioritize someone else's needs above your own convenience. 6 months into their soul experiment, Alara had her surgery. Jamin was there when she went under anesthesia, holding her hand until the last moment. He was there during the agonizing hours of the procedure, sitting with Naomi in the surgical waiting room, both of them holding vigil together. And he was there when Alara woke up, groggy and uncomfortable but alive and repaired, her smile weak but genuine when she saw both her parents beside her bed. The recovery was challenging. Weeks of restricted activity for a child who wanted to run and explore, careful monitoring of her heart's healing, adjustments to medications, and activity levels. But Jamin was present through all of it, learning that caretaking required patience he hadn't known he possessed, tenderness he'd never developed in corporate settings, vulnerability in admitting when he didn't know what to do and needed Naomi's guidance. During one of those recovery days, with Alara napping and Naomi preparing dinner, Jamin received a call from Director Chen at Orion Dynamics. The company had continued thriving under her interim leadership, implementing several initiatives that prioritized ethical AI development and transparent algorithmic systems. They wanted to know if Jamin was ready to return, and if so, in what capacity. "I'm not ready to be CEO again," Jamin told her honestly. "That role required a version of myself I'm not sure I want to resurrect, but I'd be interested in a different position, something focused on ethical oversight, on ensuring the company lives up to its stated values. Not leadership in the traditional sense, but conscience-keeping, making sure we don't sacrifice integrity for profit." "I think we could work with that," Chen said. "A newly created position, chief ethics officer maybe. Someone whose entire job is to ask difficult questions and push back when we're compromising our principles. Would that interest you?" "It would," Jamin said, "but with conditions. I work remotely 2 days a week. I leave by 5 every day to be home for dinner. And I take real vacations, actual time off where I'm not checking email or attending virtual meetings. My daughter needs to know she's my priority, not my obligation." "Done," Chen said without hesitation. Those are exactly the kinds of conditions an ethics officer should insist on. "Welcome back, Jamin. On your terms this time." When the year mark arrived, Naomi and Alara and Jamin sat together in the apartment that had become home, not his home or their temporary space, but genuinely home for all of them, and discussed what came next. "I want to stay," Alara said immediately. "I love my school here. I love having you around," she looked at Jamin. "Not just on weekends or holidays, but actually around. I love knowing both parts of who I am, the British part and the Korean part. I don't want to choose anymore." "We wouldn't go back to how it was before," Naomi added. "Even if we returned to London, you'd be part of our lives now. But Seoul has become home in ways I didn't expect. My work is here. Our community is here. And honestly, watching Alara thrive has been worth every adjustment." "So we stay," Jamin said, feeling something settle in his chest that he recognized as contentment. Not the performance of happiness, not the achievement of success, but genuine contentment with ordinary life. "We stay," Naomi confirmed. "As a family, whatever that means for us." What it meant evolved over time. They remained co-parents rather than romantic partners, both recognizing that their connection was about Alara, rather than recapturing something that had existed briefly a decade ago. But they built something more valuable: genuine partnership, mutual respect, shared commitment to raising their extraordinary child. Jamin's parents slowly, grudgingly, began participating in Alara's life. Sumin attended her coding competition, sitting stiffly in the audience but applauding when Alara's team won. Taesung invited her to the company headquarters, showing her the technology labs and introducing her to engineers who were impressed by her questions and insights. It wasn't warm, familial love, but it was acknowledgement, acceptance, a slow thawing of prejudice in the face of undeniable merit. 2 years after Naomi and Alara had first walked into Orion Dynamics, the company held its annual gala, a black tie affair celebrating innovation and achievement. Jamin attended with his family, introducing them without apology or explanation to colleagues and competitors. Alara,
now 12 and even more brilliant than before, charmed everyone she met with her intelligence and directness. Naomi, elegant in a dress she'd chosen herself rather than one selected by stylists, held conversations about ethical AI development with engineers and executives who quickly realized she was their intellectual equal. At one point in the evening, Director Park approached Jamin with a glass of champagne and a knowing smile. "You seem different," she observed. "Lighter, more present." "I am different," Jamin agreed. "I spent 37 years performing success. Now I'm actually living it." "And the difference?" Park asked. Jamin looked across the room to where Alara was animatedly explaining something to a group of amused executives, while Naomi watched with proud maternal affection. "The difference is, I'm choosing my life instead of inheriting it, building relationships instead of managing them, being honest instead of strategic." "Sounds revolutionary for someone in your position," Park said with dry amusement. "It is," Jamin said. "Turns out revolution was exactly what I needed." As the gala wound down and they prepared to leave, Alara slipped her hand into Jamin's, a gesture that had become natural, automatic, the physical manifestation of trust and connection. They walked out together into Soul's Night, a family unit that defied easy categorization but worked perfectly for them. "Thank you," Alara said suddenly, looking up at Jamin as they waited for their car. "For what?" he asked, genuinely curious. "For choosing me," she said simply. "When it mattered, when it cost you everything you thought you wanted, you chose me. That means something." Jamin crouched to her level as he had done so many times over the past 2 years, meeting her eyes directly. "You're not something I chose," he said gently. "You're someone I fought to deserve, and I'll keep fighting for that privilege every day for the rest of my life." Alara smiled, not the careful, guarded smile of a child protecting herself from disappointment, but the open, genuine smile of someone who finally felt chosen, wanted, secure in her place in the world. She hugged him tightly, and Jamin held her, feeling the steady beat of her repaired heart against his chest, knowing that this ordinary moment of holding his daughter outside a corporate gala was worth more than every achievement, every accolade, every measure of success he'd accumulated in his previous life. The car arrived, and they drove home through streets that had witnessed their transformation. Past Orion Dynamics, where everything had begun, past the medical facility where Alara had been healed, past restaurants and parks and ordinary places that had become significant because they'd built a family there. At home, Alara retreated to her room with the latest mathematics text Tae-sung had sent, their relationship having evolved into genuine intellectual mentorship. Naomi made tea, the ritual that had become their evening routine. And Jamin stood at the windows overlooking the Han River, watching the city's lights reflect on water, understanding with perfect clarity that he'd lost everything and gained what actually mattered. His empire was smaller now, his influence more constrained, his legacy more uncertain. But his daughter knew she was loved. His co-parent trusted him as a partner. His conscience was clear of the weight of denial and performance. He'd traded performance for presence, image for integrity, inherited success for chosen authenticity. And standing there in the quiet apartment with his family near, Jamin realized this was what redemption actually looked like. Not dramatic gesture or public confession, but daily choice. Consistent presence, honest relationship, the courage to be imperfect, and the humility to keep learning. He'd spent a decade running from the truth. Now he was building his life on it. And for the first time since he could remember, the person he saw reflected in the window was someone he actually recognized, someone he might even grow to respect. Not the CEO, not the heir, not the performance, just a father, a partner, a human being learning, finally, how to actually live. The lights of Soul stretched endlessly before him, full of possibility and uncertainty, and the beautiful, terrifying freedom of choosing his own path forward. Behind him, down the hall, his daughter was reading. In the kitchen, Naomi was humming softly. The apartment was full of ordinary sounds that meant everything. This was home. This was family. This was the life he'd almost missed completely, and now held with careful gratitude. This was enough, more than enough. This was everything.